The film is not as good as you might expect. Having just seen Reborn, I would think there can't be a Jeepers Creepers film that is any worse than this. And it is true, Jeepers Creepers 3 is somewhat better than Reborn, but gotta be honest, even if we put aside the Victor Salva issue, I don't think I would be recommending this because this really isn't the Creeper. This was one of the major problems with Reborn is the Creeper just felt and acted and looked so radically different from part 1. It really had almost no connection at all to the prior Creeper mythology. Jeepers Creepers 3 is technically part of a trilogy, and they do at least obey some of the rules set down with the first movie. But really, once again, the Creeper just doesn't look right. With Reborn, they had almost a zero budget, so you're just stuck, okay, they just don't have the resources. Here, they kind of do have the resources, so the Creeper sort of looks okay, but not really. And he's acting very, very strange. A pale version of other kinds of horror monsters, and what was distinct and interesting about this mythology has been lost. So, what is occurring? Well, essentially, this details what happened between Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2, because if you know the mythology, you can only work within a certain window of time. So, they're sticking to that rule. So, the only thing left is that the Creeper has to operate between the timeline of Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2, which is clearly going to present a problem because, well, the Creeper can't be dead. If he's going to show up in Jeepers Creepers 2, there's no way the heroes are going to win. They can't possibly kill the Creeper. So we're just wasting time with the Creeper mowing down a ton of victims. Sometimes the victims fight back, sometimes they falter, sometimes they put up a good fight, some of them even survive. But really, there's no tension. We know ahead of time the Creeper cannot be defeated. So we're not left with many stakes in this entire story. Whatever you want to say about the director, he has a bit of stylistic flair. He does have a style and he is good at setting up shots, but the story itself is frankly very poor and it just recycles the old tropes. We have the woman who has psychic visions, we've got the snarky dialogue, we do have some effective mixture of horror and the gothic here and there, which we also had in Reborn. And some of the myth making is interesting. We get a few more details on the Creeper. But the downside is this really is just an action film disguise. Now, you can do an action film and a horror film together, but this one looks still very, very cheap. So, Reborn looked insanely cheap. This one just looks plain old cheap, but it is jarring because they took so much care with practical effects in the first one, and that's totally been lost here. Now, of course, in Hollywood, practical can include a lot of special effects, so it's relative to the project. Nevertheless, Jeepers Creepers 1 felt fairly real. This one feels like a complete stupid fantasy. It really isn't grounded at all, and the Creeper just does a lot of weird stuff. So he's just much more playful and silly this time, and seems to have this weird snarky attitude towards everything. And I'm just like, I just don't remember him being like that. There's a lot of blood and gore, but it's not scary. There are some shocking moments, but they're not frightening. It's more like, oh, they will jolt you, but they won't scare you. Like, oh, that was shocking, that was surprising, but you're never terrified. The Creeper in the first film was terrifying. Here, he just feels like, okay, I would be scared if this was real, but he just feels more like an action hero or action anti hero. And there are horror elements, but those horror elements are very, very weak. But still, the cinematography and direction are decent, even if the script is fairly weak, and some of the performances were effective. And I did really enjoy the cameo with Trish, played by Gina, the original actress. And I thought the way they included her made a whole lot of sense. I wish we had more of her in this because really, that's all I was waiting for. Because I heard she had a cameo. I'm like, okay, when's that going to happen? That's not good. You should really be absorbed into the main story. But again, given what the mythology set up earlier, they didn't have many choices. And really, the only two options were do a prequel or do this, which is basically Jeepers Creepers 1.5. And they did that, but just added a lot of meaningless, schlocky action moments with really poor CGI and very silly, flashy tricks. Now, I love Zack Snyder, so I appreciate when people do similar things like the slow mo camera movements, but here It really went nowhere. It just felt more like a silly action comedy film than a genuine horror film, which is really shocking because I think legitimately Jeepers Creepers is one of the scariest and one of the best films I've ever seen. So, putting aside the horror genre, it's just a really great film. But it just feels like maybe that creative team got lucky. They just had a great moment of inspiration making that film, and they haven't been able to recover that glory. So, that's a negative on Jeepers Creepers 3. I guess if you want to seek it out, try to do it in a way that you don't have to formally pay the director, which nowadays is pretty easy. I'm sure this DVD is popular enough you can probably find somebody to borrow it from. There are many, many films of much higher quality at this budget and much more scary films at this budget. So I don't have any good things to say about Halloween Kills, but I would have to recommend Halloween Kills slightly more over this. Putting aside the ethics and everything with the director, it's just not good enough to even bother watching. If you want some just okay action moments, you'll get that, and that is about it.